Welcome back to Race Review, everyone, and let's just take a minute here just to take in what could be the best race of the Formula 1 season. Yes, it's the best race of the season so far. It's only the second round, and what a thriller. What an absolute stunner from the get-go. Those early laps were incredible. Spoiler alert, obviously, if you haven't seen the race, don't watch this video, would be my recommendation. But if you have, you will know Sebastian Vettel eventually went on to win a hugely thrilling Grand Prix. Those final few laps were so tense. You didn't have a clue who was going to win, and we've not seen that in Formula 1 for a very, very, very long time. And it was Valtteri Bottas in the end putting on the pressure on Sebastian. A fantastic race, not only with overtakes, something that we've not actually seen yet this season, unfortunately, but through strategy. A few crashes here and there. But, like I say, just a race for everyone. The hardcore fans, the casual fans. We didn't even need a safety car. Everything was pretty much there. And really, this was better. This would definitely be one of the best races of last season. Maybe one of the best races of the hybrid era. And Bahrain, we've seen it before it throw up a really good race. 2014, but I think this one outclasses it for me only because we saw fights across the whole field. We really did, and the fact that, you know, first all the way through till last you didn't have a clue who was going to be where, and yeah, a really great race to see. But what I'm going to do this week is go through team by team because there was so much going on throughout the race, so doing it as the race went on might take a bit long, so I won't do it that way, but I'll do it team by team, starting off with the race winners and constructors title leaders, Ferrari, and 1-2 in qualifying, a solid job. Raikkonen only just missed out. The start from both of them, Sebastian, was fantastic. Raikkonen did lose out to Valtteri Bottas on the start and was sitting in third pretty much for the whole race. Where the race started to unfold was around the pit stops for the Ferrari team. So both of them came in early, went on to the soft tyres, starting on the super softs. Valtteri, who was currently splitting the two Ferraris, went on to the mediums 2 laps later, and that would prove to be almost a huge error for Ferrari. This would mean that the Mercedes wouldn't be stopping again, and the Ferraris would both have to do one more stop. Very clever from the Mercedes boys. However, we do know that the Mercedes wasn't particularly great on the super softs, especially compared to the Ferrari. So the harder the compound, the better the Mercedes seemed to get. So for them, it was the sensible strategy to do, and it really looked like they had the pace to go on and win it. Raikkonen was the first to make his second stop, and a bit of a calamity in the stop. They couldn't get off the left rear tyre. Raikkonen went and injured one of the mechanics, so fingers crossed that he's all okay, and it was great to see the Ferrari team focused on the mechanic, making sure he was okay, rather than tended to Raikkonen's upset needs, which, to be fair to Raikkonen, he had the pace to win this weekend, and qualifying, it didn't quite go his way, and the race got caught behind the Mercedes early on, and I'm sure he's gutted another weekend which didn't quite get a plan for Raikkonen, and he started the season off well in terms of pace, so yeah, I'm sure he's a bit gutted about that for sure. But Sebastian would pretty much be on his own then. No rear gunner to help him out. It was a dead fight in those closing laps. Could Sebastian hold on with those tyres dying as each lap went on? He even said at the end of the race, when he eventually got over the line with I think a 0.6 second difference to Valtteri Bottas, who had a little look into turn 1 on the final lap but couldn't quite get it done. But he said at the end of the race that those tyres had gone pretty much 10 laps before, and so for Sebastian, a great drive, and really it could be considered for driver of the day. It really could. He really had to pull out all the stops to keep those tyres just living, really. Pirelli had said that they expect around 27 laps to be the cut-off point, and Sebastian just went far past there, and those tyres should have been gone. But he nursed them extremely well and ended the race in first place. A fantastic job from Sebastian, but Raikkonen inside of the garage, probably a bit disappointing, to be perfectly honest with you. But yeah, Ferrari, really, really solid job this weekend. Moving on then to the runner-up and third place finishers, Mercedes. Now, Valtteri Bottas started P3, best of the rest after the Ferraris, and Lewis Hamilton, after a 5-place grid penalty in qualifying before qualifying actually, due to a hydraulics leak, meaning he had to have a new gearbox, meaning, like I say, 5-place grid penalty. Qualified 4th, meaning he would start the race in 9th. And watching Hamilton come up through the pack was pretty much a joy to watch, to be perfectly honest with you. You had that scrap with Max Verstappen very early on, causing Verstappen to have a puncture, putting him pretty much out of the race. We'll go on to Red Bull later, but Hamilton pulled off what I reckon will be voted move of the season. 3 drivers down one straight. Fernando Alonso, one of them, Nico Hülkenberg and Esteban Ocon. Fantastic move. It was like, you remember Australia last year when it was Ocon, Hülkenberg and Alonso, but this year there was Hamilton to take all of them. So it was good to see, interesting to see, but honestly, Hamilton in those early laps was pretty much unstoppable. And like I say, great to see, but once we got through the pit stop phase and Hamilton was on a different strategy to everyone else, the one stop, that was when everything seemed to change. And that seems to be the point where Hamilton sort of lost the edge in terms of he didn't really know what was going on. He kept on asking his team, and there seemed to be a miscommunication going on there, and they didn't know if Vettel was coming in. That's what they were covering, and he never did. And so for Hamilton, 3rd from 9th was definitely a solid job, and once again contender for driver of the day. The other driver of the Mercedes team, obviously, is Valtteri Bottas. Now, going into this weekend after Australia, Valtteri had a really tough time. That crash in qualifying in Australia, and you know what? Qualifying this weekend wasn't too bad. Bouncing back and beating Lewis Hamilton in the qualifying session, that's not bad, is it? Let's be perfectly honest. The master of the pole position, most pole positions of all time, Lewis Hamilton, and Bottas did beat him on raw pace. Now, Bottas was on pole here last year, and so it wasn't too bad. And like I say, going into the race, it looked like the Ferraris had it completely under control, but a masterful strategy, a solid pass into turn 1 on Kimi Raikkonen, and the race win was so close to being Valtteri's. It really, really was. That last lap dive bomb, if it had just been a little bit more dirty, Sebastian wouldn't have been able to do anything, and it was hard to tell how close he was with the camera angle, but I can't help but feel that a driver like Verstappen, Ricciardo, Hamilton would have gone for it. But that's still not taken away from what a great drive it was from Valtteri today. Just to manage those tyres, just to keep his cool in that pit stop phase. And Valtteri, again, another stellar job today. And the Mercedes team, you know, a 2nd and 3rd, it's better than what they had last race. So that's something they can be proud of, but it's still not the win. You know, this is the first time in the hybrid era that the first 2 races have not been won by Mercedes. It's the first time since 2004 that the first 2 races of the season have been won by Ferrari. So maybe Ferrari really are the real deal this season. I still think the Mercedes is a quicker car, and next weekend in China we'll get a real idea of how quick that Mercedes is. A very quick circuit, China, that ridiculously long back straight, and yeah, that's when we'll really see the pace of the Mercedes, and hopefully a trouble-free weekend. Where could they have been without the Hamilton penalty? Maybe they could have had the win with their ridiculously good pace on those harder compounds, but all in all things considered, starting 3rd and 9th to end with a 2nd and 3rd, I think Mercedes will take that, and yeah, their car did look solid today, and so going forward, I don't think they'll be too worried about the championship. Now looking at the constructors, we're going to move on to the team in 3rd place, which you'd probably expect to be Red Bull, but after today's non-finish with both drivers, it's actually McLaren Renault that are in 3rd in the constructors. I know that is ridiculous to believe, but yes, McLaren are in 3rd in the constructors. Obviously, we're only 2 races in, but not a bad start for McLaren, especially Fernando Alonso, who's on 16 points, Stoffel Van Dorn on 6. So, arguably, despite Toro Rosso Honda this weekend, pretty much wiping away everyone's expectations for them this weekend, McLaren, not too bad, is it, being in 3rd? quite a race for Stoffel, for sure, and Fernando was in a fight really for 5th place between himself, Magnussen and Hulkenberg. That was really one of the most interesting midfield fights, I would say. Gasly at one point looked like he would be involved in that fight, but the other guys had to come in for an extra stop at the end, so that's why Gasly ended up in the 4th place. But Alonso and Van Dorn was a solid race once again. Another double points finish for McLaren. That's 2 in a row, and they've not had that for a very long time. 2014, I would say, the last double points finishes. I mean, I don't know that for sure, and they might have fluked it in 2016, but really good job from McLaren Renault today, especially considering they qualified P13 and 14, both drivers. That's really, really good. And Alonso did show a bit of skill, a bit of defensive work against Hamilton and the likes, but would not be able to hold them off, especially in those early stages. And it was interesting as well that Alonso starting P13, by the end of lap 1, got up to P8, ahead of Lewis Hamilton, which was pretty insane, to be perfectly honest with you. The fact that Alonso and the McLaren had able to get that far up and pass Mercedes, good job from McLaren and good job from Alonso and Stoffel. I don't think I'd give either of those two driver of the day today, however, both solid job. And you know what? Last weekend, if I'd have looked at Alonso or Stoffel and it was this race performance, I would have considered them for driver of the day, but the standard was just that high this weekend, I just can't. So, big stuff from McLaren this weekend, and like I say, after qualifying it looked like no points finishes, so to finish 7th and 8th, very good job from them indeed. So then we move on to Red Bull, 4th in the Constructors. What an awful weekend. First double retirement for Red Bull since South Korea 2010. 8 full seasons have gone by since then, and that's got to be a real kick in the teeth for the Red Bull boys. Really has. They came into the season after pre-season testing thinking, yeah, we've got a better car than Ferrari. We could challenge Mercedes for the championship. Well, not only are Mercedes not the ones leading it, Red Bull are certainly not ahead of Ferrari, and they're currently behind McLaren. So what went wrong for the two Red Bulls this weekend? Qualifying, Max Verstappen lost control again. He lost control in Australia early on in the race, spinning into through turn 1 and going into turn 2. And then, in qualifying yesterday, he lost it again through turns 3 and 4 into the wall, qualifying over starting P16. Ricciardo, on the other hand, qualified 5th, but with Hamilton's penalty would start the race 4th. Started alright for both drivers, then on lap 2, it all went wrong. Max Verstappen not dive bombing Hamilton, it was looking like a pretty clean pass, to be perfectly honest with you, but then squeezed him out a bit too much, right-left puncher. Hamilton didn't sustain any real damage on his front wing, which was good for Hamilton, considering he got completely cut off. You could argue that Hamilton maybe should have backed off. Verstappen did mention it on the Channel 4 interviews that he believes that Hamilton should have had some sort of penalty. I don't agree with that whatsoever. So, as Verstappen was coming back, Ricciardo's pretty much car decided, no thank you, I don't really fancy doing the Bahrain Grand Prix, and just turned itself off, race over lap 2. Verstappen did make it back to the pit, but on a couple of laps later, retired himself. The Red Bulls, a weekend to forget, and in China, a track where they're probably most likely going to be behind both the Ferraris and the Mercedes all weekend long. Yeah, this was a track they could have done some good stuff on for sure. Ricciardo definitely could have been in for the race win if he'd have gone on the one-stop strategy. So, real missed opportunity from the Red Bull team. And with probably a difficult weekend coming up in China as well, Red Bull, they've got to find some pace somewhere. And if they did want to fight for the championship, they're going to be, well, they're going to have to be bang on every single race, knocking it out the park, and just looks unlikely. Moving on to the third Renault team in the Constructors' Championship, and that is the Renault Works team. Hulkenberg, 7th today. It's a good points haul from him. Oh, it wasn't 7th, it was 6th, wasn't it? I do apologise, it was 6th for Hulkenberg today. I'm so used to Hulkenberg living in 7th place. It was 6th for Nico Hülkenberg. A good job, more points for him, more points for Renault. Like I say, he was getting involved with that fight with Alonso, Magnussen, a little bit with Gasly for that 4th, 5th sort of area place on the field. Pretty nondescript apart from that for Hülkenberg, and Sainz was nowhere again all weekend. I don't really know what happened to Carlos. Last weekend he had issue with his water cooling, and I thought in the off-season and looking at last season that these two guys would be very closely matched. But this weekend, Hülkenberg just had the edge all weekend, and if Sainz does want to get that Red Bull seat for next season, if Ricciardo leaves, he's got some work on his hands, because Gasly, like I say, this weekend, he looks right in the mix now to be taking that Red Bull seat, potentially away from Carlos Sainz. So Sainz going to have to pull his finger out a little bit, but we're only early on in the season, and yeah, not the best weekend for Sainz, but 6th for Hülkenberg. That is positive, and 5th in the Constructors. At the end of the season, they're going to be wanting to push for 4th, but 5th at the moment isn't too bad of a job. Moving into 6th place in the Constructors is Toro Rosso Honda. What a race for Pierre Gasly. Really, really fantastic job. For starters, getting that Toro Rosso Honda into Q2. Yellow in Q3, Hartley qualified P11, which was a solid job from Hartley. But Gasly getting into Q3 with P9, and then in Q3 getting P6, and then with Hamilton's penalty, P5. Stuff dreams are made of. It really, really is. Great job from Gasly there, and everyone expected him to go back, maybe just cling on to some final points. But no, he stayed in 5th, and then when Ricciardo went out the race, and then when Raikkonen went out the race, he moved into 4th. That was because Hamilton had passed him then, and stayed there pretty much unchallenged all race. Really, really solid job. A good chunk behind Lewis Hamilton, but a good chunk in front of Kevin Magnussen. Stellar job from Toro Rosso. Hartley, a pretty nondescript afternoon. He had contact early on with Sergio Perez. Did get a 10-second penalty, which I thought was very, very, very harsh. Yes, it was Hartley's fault, but Vettel got 10 seconds last year in Baku when he deliberately hit Hamilton. And I think, yeah, if you compare the two incidents, then what do you think? The FIA have always been known for being very inconsistent, and I think first lap incident, a 10-second penalty, ruined Hartley's race. It really, really did. And unfortunately for Hartley, another nondescript weekend. I'm sure he's just praying for a weekend where no issues, clean sailing. And after a P11 in qualifying, anything could have happened in the race. So, yeah, Hartley, meh. Gasly, exceptional. It really, really was one of the best drives I've seen in Formula 1 for a long, long time. Just that Honda as well. How embarrassing for McLaren, can we just say as well? How embarrassing is that? 3 years with McLaren, their best finish with a 5th. Their second race with Toro Rosso, they got a 4th. You know, it's really, really stellar stuff. It really is. Gasly, hats off to him this weekend. And it's a weekend where, just like last week, or a couple of weeks ago in Australia, top teams did miss out, you know, and Gasly was there to pick up the spills, and good job from Gasly. Like I said, I can't give him enough praise this weekend. Such a good drive indeed. Moving on to 7th in the Constructors, and how they are 7th in the Constructors, I'm not too sure, and that's Haas Ferrari. Magnussen picking up the first points of the season for the team with a P5. Like I say, he was involved in that scrap for the P5, P4. Grosjean was nowhere. After a difficult qualifying, don't really know why it was so difficult. Just couldn't quite get that lap together at the end after the Verstappen crash. Grosjean could not do another lap that was representative. Struggled in that final corner, which meant he was out exactly the same lap time as Fernando Alonso, who made it into Q2. Just because Alonso did it first meant he would make it through to Q2. So Grosjean gutted, and in the race, his memorable moment was holding that Magnussen. Now, I spoke to a few people about this incident, and they believe that Grosjean was at fault there. You know, Grosjean should have got out of the way instantly. I have a different view, really. Grosjean definitely should have been told off for the way in turn 2 he nearly destroyed Magnussen's front wing. That was ridiculous, and yeah, for sure Magnussen should have been angry at that. The issue I have is that why should Grosjean let him through when he knew he was coming in and Magnussen had just got onto the back of him? You know, we don't want it to be a sport where every time a teammate comes behind a teammate, they just say, oh, let him through. You know, we do want some fighting between teammates, and really, would it have affected Magnussen's race that much? I mean, yes, like I say, I do think it would have been so much easier for Grosjean just to let Magnussen through, especially because, like I say, Grosjean was coming in, but again, I think Magnussen should give it more than one lap. You know, at least 2 laps, and I don't know, I'm very 50-50 about it. Some of me thinks, yeah, Grosjean, come on mate, just let him through, happy days, and that definitely that swipe into turn 2, that should have been dealt with straight away. But I don't know, part of me thinks Magnussen should have waited a bit longer rather than swearing all the time. You know, it is a family sport at the end of the day, and yeah, mixed opinions. Yes, Grosjean should have got out the way. Magnussen's reaction was poor, so I want to know definitely for sure what your thoughts on that incident are down in the comments below. 100% I want to know what that one is all about. Next then in the championship is surprisingly Alfa Sauber. Can we believe this? Sauber and Marcus Ericsson finally got some points. They've not got points, that partnership, since Italy 2015. A whole 50 Grand Prix gap since Ericsson's last points. What a great job from Marcus today. Coming to the season, a lot of hate went his way that he was in that Sauber. A lot of people thought it should be Giovinazzi, and a lot of people, including myself, thought Leclerc was going to wipe the floor with him. But if these first 2 Grand Prix are to go by, that's not the case. And Marcus looks very, very strong. And this race proves it, starting all the way down in P17, finishing 9th. Such a valuable race for Sauber. Only their second race with the Alfa Romeo partnership and points. That is exactly what they want. Don't look the fastest team on the grid, and for sure I wouldn't say they were the 8th fastest team, but for them that is a very, very special result. And Ericsson, for his career, that's very, very needed indeed. Good job, Marcus Ericsson. Definitely a contender for driver of the day. 9th in the Constructors then, and second to last in the Team Constructors is Force India. Haven't times changed? 4th last year, 9th now. 1 point today, courtesy of Esteban Ocon. None scored for Sergio Perez. What an awful start to the season. Last year, I believe it was Monaco, the first race, they didn't get a double point score. Now, they've got 1 point after 2 races. What a calamity. Ocon, a pretty quiet race, was higher up in the top 10 in the early part of the race, but slowly went backwards as the race unfolded. Sergio Perez getting involved with contact with Brendan Hartley on the opening lap, and then apart from that, we didn't really see a lot of him. He was fighting down the back of the field with Romain Grosjean. And like I've said, for some of these teams, a race to forget for Force India. Going to China next, long straights, then Baku. Hopefully that Mercedes engine can help Force India, because they need something right now, and hopefully long straights is the fix they need. Not a bad driver lineup either, so they've got to find pace somewhere. But moving on to the only team left in Formula 1 without points, that's amazing, by the way, that we've had 2 races and only 1 team doesn't have points, and that is Williams. By far the worst team on the grid, and that driver lineup does not look anything special. So Rotkin in this race did do some good defensive driving. We did see him about halfway through the race. He stayed out much longer than a lot of the other people, and we did see a sort of defensive driving session for Sergei Sirotkin, but unfortunately it wasn't enough for the Russian to get him anywhere near the points. And Lance Stroll, a weekend to forget for him, like again I've said for some others, but Lance Stroll, Jesus, not great at all. And Williams, I don't see them getting a point anytime soon. Again, like I say, China and Baku next, so very long circuits with long straights, which means this will be potentially their best chance of points, but they're going to have to hope for safety cars, hope for some of them big players to get knocked out of races, and, you know, big opportunities in these first 2 races to get points, and they've been nowhere. Really, they haven't. And Lance Stroll last weekend in Australia, I don't know why I keep saying last weekend, but last race weekend, I sort of mean, in Australia, that was his big chance, getting into Q2, and with the two Hasses dropping out, real big chance for Lance Stroll, but just nowhere. And they're going to struggle this year, Williams, and you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if they ended on no points. And I did predict them higher up in the standings, but yeah, they're the worst team in Formula One. I'm happy to say that for sure. And good things, a miracle's got to happen to Williams to get them out of this rut that they're currently in. So this race, what do I give it out of 10? It's got to be up there. Fantastic race. Teams, overtakes, amazingly overtakes. Strategy, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. The only thing missing was that big crash, the big smash that we all love to see. And I'd have probably given it a 10 if Valtteri had just overtaken Vettel at the end. It was so close, but not quite. And the driver of the day, very difficult to choose from. Obviously, like I say, so many overtakes up and down the field, so many fantastic stories up and down the field. But there's one man I'm going to give it to, and that is Pierre Gasly. Also, I'm looking at Vettel for a really well-controlled race, to be perfectly honest with you. Looked after those tyres pretty incredibly. Valtteri Bottas I'm looking at as well. Kevin Magnussen, Alonso, Ericsson down there. Ocon even holding on for a point. Max Verstappen. He used to win it all the time, didn't he? So, hey, we'll throw him in there. But Hamilton as well. I can't believe I'm forgetting Hamilton. What a great race he had. But Toro Rosso Honda holding 4th place. That first lap overtake on Daniel Ricciardo, really fantastic job. A whole weekend as well. You know, driver of the day, driver of the weekend, I'm going to give to Pierre Gasly. That was my race review for the Bahrain Grand Prix. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments section below. As always, guys, remember to like, subscribe, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.